And we welcome you back to America Talks Live. I'm John Bachman alongside Newsmax health editor Nick Tate. Nick, great to have you with us as we bid adieu to 2017. We're going to talk about some of the biggest health stories that were impacting our audience in 2017 and looking ahead to 2018 because we do expect some significant changes. Some of the big changes in 2017 included genetic breakthroughs, advances, including in Alzheimer's and other medical treatments.
Right, sure.
So let's start with that. Let's talk about these genetic breakthroughs and how they are being used, specifically these things called liquid biopsies.
Right. You know, typically biopsies have involved going in through invasive procedures and taking a piece of the lung or breast or prostate and then testing them for tumor cells. But now they have these what are called liquid biopsies where you test in the blood for the DNA signatures, the DNA fingerprints of cancer. And the beauty part of that is you can find out very early on before there are even symptoms or any problems that indicate the presence of cancer, which speeds the treatment. You know, it wasn't long ago, a generation ago, there were really only genetic tests for a couple things. Now there are something like 10,000 health conditions you can test for. And with companies like 23andMe, which have gone kind of outside the healthcare system, they really literally put your own healthcare and your own genetic history into your own genetic heritage into your own hands. It's really an amazing thing.
Yeah, that also allows the patient or someone, a family member of the patient, to have more control over their own health care and be more educated.
Sure. It's a whole new world, but you can find out, you know, not only things like, am I likely to lose my hair as I get older, but you can find out what your predisposition is for cancer, heart disease, diabetes, even high cholesterol, and that can lead you to these new treatments that change the genes in your body to help you fight those diseases.
It's amazing. I mean, there's obviously been a lot more attention paid to things like glioblastoma with John McCain's diagnosis earlier this year. Hearing Joe Biden talk about his son's brain cancer, and you hear about the developments in that particular type of cancer. It sounds promising in the long term, not so much in the short term. But do you feel like more and more cancers that were once death sentences will become more of a chronic illness as these types of tests improve?
Absolutely true. In fact, more Americans are living with cancer today than dying of it every year. Record numbers of Americans are living with it because of these new treatments and these new advances. So, you know, cancer is becoming a condition that you manage like diabetes and is not necessarily going to be death sentence. And watch, I'm thinking this was a big, genetics was a big medical story for 2017, but 2018 more treatments are going to be rolled out in the marketplace, so we'll see more there too.
All right, let's talk about some of the best ways, and I'm going to kind of guess on this that these are ways we may have heard of before, but ways to cut back your chances of getting cancer, heart disease, and Alzheimer's.
Right. Well, you know, if we talk about genetics, as they say, is not destiny, because you're predestined. You have a genetic predisposition to heart disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's. It doesn't mean you'll actually develop them, because the research also shows this year that lifestyle changes that you make can counteract your genetic deficits. So it's nothing, you know, exciting. I hate to say it, but it's eating a healthy diet, high in fruits and vegetables that are really good for you, lowering the levels of no smoking, red meat, alcohol, getting daily exercise, getting regular sleep, and one of the most important things you can do is really figure out a way to deal with stress and lower your exposure to chemical pollutants. So, you know, these are not, you know, brain surgery ideas, but they do work.
I know, it bears repeating because we talk about them all the time.
Yes.
They're so simple, but so hard to do.
I know, it's true. You know, think of it this way: energy, calories in, calories out. Whatever you consume, you should burn with exercise, and make sure what you're eating is high-quality stuff.
Well, let's talk about something I know is personal to you and to me as well, and that's Alzheimer's. I know we both have had family members that have suffered from Alzheimer's disease. Talk about the developments in Alzheimer's treatments we've seen this year.
It's been very disappointing couple decades. Big Pharma spent billions of dollars on literally hundreds of drugs that have turned out to be not really very helpful in combating, treating, or curing Alzheimer's. But just in the last year or two, there have been more advances that have been made in Alzheimer's research than in the prior 4 decades. Principally, what researchers are finding is that there are features in the brain that you can identify before there are even symptoms of Alzheimer's and begin to treat them. We're talking principally about these protein plaques that accumulate in the brain. You may have heard about them, amyloid or tau proteins.
Right.
We don't know why they happen. Some believe that it may be the brain's mechanism for combating viruses and bacterial infections, but they gum up the works in the brain, they kill brain cells, and more exciting than identifying the connections between them to Alzheimer's, there have been a variety of drugs that are being tested. natural substances and even things like ultrasound and things like probiotics can remove or reverse the development of those plaques. So the prospect is that one day soon we may be able to take a drug or a supplement or modify our diet in such a way to strip these protein plaques from our brain in the way that millions of Americans now take statin drugs to remove cholesterol from your blood to reduce the risk of stroke and heart disease. And I think we're on the cusp of that era. There have been some big breaks this year.
Doctors know what to look for. They're starting to find ways to treat it. Now we just got to know why it's caused. That would be the next big step. All right, so we talked about some big things that we expect to see we saw in 2017. Now let's talk about 2018. And you say one of the big thing that's going to happen, and we'll talk about Obamacare in just a moment, but immunotherapy first. Let's talk about that.
That's right. Immunotherapy, the history of conventional medicine in the last 100 years has been the development of drugs, chemo, radiation, and surgery to target cancer and other diseases. You poison it with chemo, you burn it out with radiation, you cut it out with surgery. Immunotherapy works in a completely different way by working within the body's natural defenses, boosting them to fight cancer and heart disease. This year, the FDA licensed the first-line immunotherapy treatment for lung cancer, for a genetically linked lung cancer. What basically it does is it arms your immune system to fight cancer, and it was hugely successful. Keytruda is the drug. It was the thing you may have heard that Jimmy Carter got that eradicated his cancer. And although it's just the first one that's been approved as more effective than chemo for cancer, the expectation is that it will usher in a new breed of medicines. There's something like 2,000 of these immunotherapy approaches and drugs in the pipeline. So in the next year, we're going to see them coming out, and they will be going after everything from melanoma to breast cancer, prostate cancer, and the variety of other cancers that we're dealing with.
And hopefully at a price point that more consumers can afford.
That's going to be the issue, is the cost, because they are very expensive. But yes, that's exactly right.
All right, we know stem cell treatments are going to take off too, but we're running out of time, so I want to talk about Obamacare because this is important. We saw the individual mandate repeal in Obamacare just recently last week. What does that mean for 2018?
It's a big deal in terms of it is the linchpin in Obamacare, and it is the thing that funds a lot of it. But it really is not full repeal of Obamacare. I believe that costs are going to continue to rise, and those access points are going to continue to shrink for people who have health insurance. So unless Congress and the White House decides they want to deal with things like how to cover people with pre-existing conditions, lower those premiums, and expand access, we're still going to be dealing with this issue. You know, John, what would an end of your conversation with you be about big health stories and looking ahead without talking about Obamacare?
We gotta talk about
I think next year it's going to be on the topic for us to discuss too.
If prices are going up and access to medical care is going down, do Republicans have a big problem on their hands?
They clearly do. I mean, at this point, they own it because they're running all three branches of government, Congress, the White House, and controlling the Supreme Court. So at this point, we can no longer continue to just blame Obamacare for all the problems if they're not being addressed. That's my view.
On the other hand, if things start to get really bad, all gloom and doom, the GOP can ride in there and save the day.
It could be.
They can hope. I don't know.
It could be, and there are a lot of good ideas out there. Maybe that's for a future segment on the things that people are talking about that might happen.
We'll definitely have you back to talk about that. We were just talking to John Gizzi about some of those popular items, you know, allowing people to keep their kids on their health insurance plan until they're 26 and other things like that, allowing health care to be purchased across state lines. Why hasn't the GOP settled on 5 or 6 of these key items that everybody seems to agree on, but nobody can seem to agree on who's supposed to take credit for them?
If only I knew, John. You know, these ideas have been out there for a long time, and it seems to me that they're worth giving a try right now. Maybe the pain hasn't gotten great enough that the GOP feels like it's the responsibility of Congress to step up. The president has clearly said, we want reform, we want it now. We've taken the first step. So maybe by choking off the funding for Obamacare, by eliminating the taxes under the individual mandate, that will create more of a crisis that will require congressional involvement. We'll see.
You see the theme going here? You know, management by crisis, it seems to be what Congress does best. But I don't envy the Republican Party right now. They have a lot on their plate that they have to tackle. And again, if prices are going to continue to spiral upwards and accessibility to health care goes down, they're going to have to fix something real quick.
There's a great opportunity, though, too. I mean, if the Republicans can go to the voters in 2018 and say, we got tax reform last year, you know, some people say it's not full reform, but they certainly can claim a victory.
They can say they did something.
They did something. Tax reform 2017, healthcare reform 2018. They could be sitting pretty in November 2018.
Could being the operative word there. We won't hold our breath. Nick Tate, we'll have you back to talk more about 2018 very soon. Thanks for being with us. And you always
pleasure.
Nick Tate, Newsmaxhealth.com.